President Trump has already signed a number of important pieces of legislation. This week, he signed 2 bipartisan initiatives to expand opportunities for women in science. This includes Barbara Comstock's bill to encourage young women to pursue careers in the STEM fields. Also, the president has already signed 3 bills into law that block harmful regulations. This includes protecting coal country from rules that would have wiped out thousands of good-paying, family-supporting jobs. This is the first time since 2001 that Congress has reversed harmful regulations under the Congressional Review Act. And the House has already passed another 10 of these bills, so more relief is on its way. We're also making progress on our work to repeal and replace Obamacare. Working very closely with the Trump administration, we will soon introduce legislation to help lower costs, increase choices, and give people more control over their health care. We are united and we are determined to rescue people from this collapsing health care law and to keep our promise to the American people. Lastly, I want to take a moment to echo the President's strong condemnation of the recent anti-Semitic incidents that have been taking place across the country. Across this country, we've been seeing vandalism, acts of desecration, and bomb threats. In Whitefish Bay, Wisconsin, right outside the district I serve, a community right in north side of Milwaukee, there have been 2 threats on the Jewish community center there, a community center I've been to. One as recently as February 20th. To think about parents getting those calls in the middle of the day, it makes your stomach turn. This is wrong. These threats and these attacks on Jewish Americans are vile and disgusting. They are rooted in a poisonous ideology of hate, and they must be wholeheartedly rejected. So on behalf of every Republican and every Democrat in Congress, on behalf of the whole House, I want our friends in the Jewish community to know that we stand with them. We stand with you. We've got to stand to help root out this evil wherever it may surface. These are disgusting acts of violence and vandalism and of bigotry, and they must be rejected. Questions?
Did the Attorney General mislead the committee regarding his contacts with the Russians, and should he recuse himself?
Well, okay, the 2 questions. First, I will just refer to the Senate Judiciary Committee. I checked the transcript and all of that, so I can't speak to what the Judiciary Committee transcript is. Frankly, I haven't read that. Should he recuse himself? I think he answered that question this morning, which is if he himself is the subject of an investigation, of course he would. But if he's not, I don't see any purpose or reason to doing this. Let's take a step back for a second here. Number one, we know that Russia tried to meddle in the election. Why do we know this? Because we in Congress and the intelligence community did an investigation after the election which discovered Russia was trying to meddle in the election. This is something we all well know. Here's another thing. We have seen no evidence from any of these ongoing investigations that anybody in the Trump campaign or the Trump team was involved in any of this. We've been presented with no evidence that an American was colluding with the Russians to meddle in the election. This is something we also know. We're still doing investigations. You got to remember, in the House and in the Senate, the intelligence committees have been investigating this. The intelligence community itself, not the committees, but the community, did an investigation after the election and gave us the results of that investigation before the inauguration. The House Intelligence Committee just finished coming up with its oversight plan to continue investigations. We will always make sure that we are protecting our sources and methods and getting to the bottom of any of these things. But we have seen no evidence, been presented with no evidence that anybody on the Trump campaign or an American was involved, including with the Russians.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. What about the idea, though, that the Obama administration had tried to preserve some of this information that was coming out about Russia because they believed that this influenced the election? And secondarily, though, that was either A, an effort to keep the story alive because they don't like the outcome of the election, or B, contributes to what we're seeing now as these inquiries continue.
Yeah, I think part of what is happening, I think Democrats are letting their hair on fire to get you to cover this story, to try and keep repeating the same story. I think they're trying to get this coverage going. There's nothing new that we have seen here. This is stuff we've been going over. And by the way, we're going to make sure that we leave no stone unturned, and that is why our intelligence committees are conducting the investigations. And that's where they should be conducted, because you have to protect your sources and methods of intelligence gathering, which is why we have intelligence committees in the first place.
But to follow up briefly, is that what you think that they were doing, the Democrats?
Oh, I can't speak to I'm not going to speak to the motives of the IC, the intelligence community, before this. I can't speak to their motives. But all I can tell you is, you know this as well, they did an investigation, intelligence community-wide. Many of us went down and got the briefings from Clapper and Brennan after the election, before the inauguration, and never have we ever seen any evidence presented to us that an American or a person in the Trump campaign was involved or working with the Russians.
Mr. Speaker, the defense appropriations bill was filed today. Do you plan will that head to the president by itself, or will it be with other measures, and will it be the vehicle for a fiscal 17 round?
I would have to defer to the Senate on that one. We're passing that bill off the floor here in the House. Whether or not they can take it up, or they're going to do something with it, merge it with something else, it's more of a Senate question. For Senator McConnell, his problem is calendar. It takes him a lot longer to do things over there than it does us. So he's got to manage his calendar. So whether or not that goes separately or is added is something that you're going to have to ask the Senate.
But what about floor time for appropriations bills in the House? Are you gonna?
Yeah, we're moving it. So you already know we're moving our bill. Are we going to have 11 bills moving? No. For FY17, we don't have the time for that as well. So we're going with defense first. We think defense is important. The reason we think we need to move defense as quickly as possible is it's a continuing resolution is uniquely bad for the military, because a continuing resolution for the military, they have to buy exactly what they bought last year, this year. That's not how the military operates, whether it's munitions, whether it's supplies. They need to have the flexibility through an appropriations bill that you don't have in a continuing resolution to be able to customize what they need, whether it's, supplies, munitions, bullets, missiles, you name it. Now, let me go somebody in the back, yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Lisa from the PBS NewsHour, at the risk of repeating myself again. Two questions. One on the Attorney General. I want to make sure I understand your position. You're saying there's nothing new here, and I understand you're deferring us to the committee transcript. But we now know that he did meet with the Russian ambassador, and in addition, he at least implied, and some believe he stated, that he had not spoken with the Russians. Do you think there's no questions to be asked there?
Sure, but ask him questions. But honestly, we meet with ambassadors all the time. I mean, I did a reception about 100 yards that way with like 100 ambassadors last year. I don't even remember all the ones I met with and took pictures with. It's really common for members of Congress to meet with ambassadors. I met with the Indian ambassador yesterday. So that kind of thing happens all of the time. As to the rest of it, I would just defer you to Jeff Sessions and the Senate Judiciary Committee. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On the issue of immigration, there have been reports of immigrants who are in the country illegally, but who are otherwise longtime residents who have been living law-abiding.
You mean don't have criminal backgrounds?
Right. Being caught up in the raids. Notably, there was a case yesterday of a young dreamer down in Mississippi who was arrested and detained right after a press conference where she was speaking with clergy and others about her concerns about immigration. Is there any role for Congress to step in and take a second look at President Trump's executive actions, or is this the new norm?
No. I think there's always a role for Congress under every instance in every administration to conduct oversight of the executive branch and how they perform in all these cases. I can tell you this. The priority of the Trump administration, and we've spoken with this, I spoke with Secretary Kelly a couple days ago about this, is to secure the border and deport criminal aliens, people who have not just here illegally, but people who are here illegally who are violent criminals. That's the goal. Now, you saw this kind of thing happening in the Obama administration as well. Sometimes people slip through the cracks, but the priority and the goal is to not go out there and deport dreamers. The priority and the goal is to secure the border and deport people who are violent criminals who are making our communities less safe.
So what can Congress do?
Manu.
Mr. Speaker, if there really is nothing there on the whole Russia issue, why not just allow a special prosecutor to investigate?
First of all,
this?
we don't have that
Sure.
law. Second of all,
But you could pass a law to establish it.
my own view is you have to protect the sources and the methods of our intelligence gathering capabilities, especially with adversaries like Russia. And that is why the Committee of Jurisdiction, which is supposed to protect those methodologies, should be the Intelligence Committee. The Intelligence Committee, just so you know, Manu, they've been doing an investigation for some time now. They just recently added more scope to that investigation on a bipartisan basis. So you have Adam Schiff, the ranking member, Devin Nunes, the chairman, agreed to the scope of an investigation going forward. That is exactly where, from the Congress standpoint, that investigation should occur. Because remember, at the end of the day, we have to protect our intelligence assets. We do not want to compromise our sources and our methods of getting intelligence from any adversary, let alone Russia.
So you oppose a special prosecutor?
We don't even have the law.
You oppose legislation?
Go
I
ahead.
just wanted to ask about one aspect of this House.
Who are you?
Daniel Wrenches from Feature Story News.
From what?
Feature Story News.
Okay.
Yeah, we're an agency here in DC. One aspect of the House Intelligence Committee investigation is to investigate the leaks themselves. So I'm sure some of my colleagues will be concerned that that will cross a line and will create a degree of insecurity among journalists. So can you talk about how you think that part
Sure.
of the
Leaking classified information is a crime. And if we have evidence that somebody in the executive branch is committing a crime, we should prosecute that person.
Last question.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask the Freedom Caucus, the wife of the Freedom Caucus leader this week sent an email to a bunch of Republicans saying you need to hound your office, kill, quote, grind care, because it's not real, repeal and replace. This is just, I guess, the latest example of conservatives sort of, squawking at the bill you're working on. And I'm wondering, what are you doing to get them on board? Are you concerned about this? Does the White House need to tell them specifically point blank that they're behind your proposal, if that is the case?
Let me give you a quick refresher of history. We have been running on repealing and replacing Obamacare since 2010. In 2016, the House, in a bottom-up way, set a working group together, the Commerce Committee, the Ways and Means Committee, the Education Workforce Committee, and then any other member of Congress who cares about this issue participated in a working group to come up with a plan for what we would replace Obamacare with. Much of it was modeled off the Tom Price legislation, which we as conservatives have always seen as sort of the gold standard for replacing Obamacare. He's now the Secretary of HHS. That is the bill, the plan that we ran on in 2016. We told America, here is our vision for how we replace Obamacare after we repeal Obamacare. That's the bill we're working on right now. That's the bill we're working on with the Trump administration. We're all working off the same piece of paper, the same plan. So we are in sync, the House, the Senate, and the Trump administration, because this law is collapsing. And you can't just repeal it. You have to repeal it and replace it with a system that actually works. And that is exactly what we're doing. And I am perfectly confident that when it's all said and done, we're going to unify, because we all, every Republican, ran on repealing and replacing, and we're going to keep our promises. Thank you.
Why is the plan under lock and key?
All right, Vice President Mike Pence is coming up in just a few minutes. Don't go anywhere, folks. Vice President Mike Pence is coming up in just a few minutes. He's going to be speaking at Frame USA. It's a company that makes windows, frames, doors, and all that stuff. So he's going to be speaking there regarding jobs, stuff made in the USA, and the economy. So stay tuned. I'll put on some music for right now. When the feed comes up, it will be up on your screen. Thank you very much for joining us. President Donald Trump is set to speak right after this. So click the link in the description below and go over there, give it a thumbs up, share it, and also make sure you set the notification. When it goes live, you'll get a heads up. But make sure to share it on social media, please, and thank you very much.
Do you agree that fairness and consistency in due process are important components of the personnel system for federal employees?
Absolutely.
Inspector Rob, do arbitrary personnel practices deter whistleblowers from speaking out about security deficiencies?
I believe that it's got a chilling effect. Anytime there is the threat of some sort of improper personnel practice as a result of making a protected disclosure, for example, of a safety situation or other kind of misconduct on the part of the agency, that there is always that fear that there is a chilling effect that something will happen to that person.
So if TSA employees are reluctant to raise these deficiencies they observe, couldn't this put aviation security at risk?
Well, that's absolutely the case, and we get at DHS something like 20,000 complaints a year from various DHS employees raising exactly those issues. But we do worry, of course, as Ms. Lerner does, that those folks can be retaliated against if, in fact, the word of their cooperation gets out.
I'm going to make a statement now. TSA's arbitrary and inconsistent personnel actions against its employees not only affect morale, but they also create serious risks to aviation security. Every member of Congress is intimately aware of the securities and the responsibilities that are placed on our TSA, and we trust them because we, in our job, must fly back and forth on a regular basis. In TSA, we have a test case of what happens when an agency's employees are excluded from due process protection of Title V. The results are a disaster, and they should never be repeated at any federal agency. To correct what we have seen at TSA, Congress should act now to ensure full civil service protection under Title V are available to all TSA employees, including TSA officers. And also, to my Republican colleagues, when we talk about rolling back federal civil service protections, understand, as we have made a commitment here on this committee to ensure that we protect whistleblowers, when we draw back, as Mr. Roth has said, these protection has a chilling effect. Because if I'm not going to be protected, I'm not going to come forward. With that, I yield back my time.
Thank you. Now I recognize the ranking member, Mr. Cummings.
Thank you very much. Last week, the committee conducted an interview of former Deputy Administrative TSA Mark Hatfield, and he told the committee that TSA was, quote, governed by self-direction and, quote, which, quote, bred misbehavior, quote, and led to toxicity rather than a healthy agency, end quote. Mr. Roth, you testified before the committee in November of 2015 about security failures that you uncovered at the time that Mr. Hatfield was serving as Deputy Administrator. You said that an in-depth round of covert testing at TSA found results that you characterize as, quote, disappointing and troubling, end of quote. Do you think that the toxic environment in which self-direction bred misbehavior, as the former Deputy Administrator described, contributed to the security deficiencies you identified?
Certainly what we found, and I think TSA leadership will testify to this as well, or has testified this as well, there was a push to move people through the line and ignore sort of the security aspects of what they were doing. So culturally, there was enormous pressure on the rank and file to just keep the lines moving and not worry as much about security. So I think the answer to your question is yes, we found that sort of culture there that disregarded aviation security.
And so I take it that you found that to be a major problem, huh?
That's correct, yes.
Considering the mission of TSA.
Correct.
So they were probably missing things they should have caught.
Right. I mean, we have issues with TSA across the entire spectrum of what they do, not only at the checkpoint, but how it is that they deal with their own employees, how they deal with airport workers, how it is that they guard the perimeter. The challenges that TSA faces are just enormous. I think it is probably the most difficult job in DHS, which is really saying something, to try to screen 2 million passengers a day, 900,000 different airport employees with a staff of, and then pay attention to a staff of something like 60,000 people. It is an enormous job, and
dealing with the public, trying to get to where they got to go, and I guess many people feeling like they're going through too many changes sometimes.
2 million passengers a day, so just in the course of a 10-minute hearing, that's hundreds and hundreds of people.
Back in 2015, you testified that the most critical task facing TSA was, quote, creating a culture of change within TSA and giving the TSA workforce the ability to identify and address risks without fear of retribution, end of quote. What retribution did you observe at TSA, and why did you believe that the most critical task facing the agency was giving the workforce the ability to identify risks without fear of retribution?
We had seen, and some of this is simply in the public sphere, public media, about instances, for example, as this committee has highlighted, with regard to the forced transfers, for example, and the arbitrary nature of demotions and those kinds of things. And we had seen that, and in talking to TSOs and people within TSA, we had gotten the sense that there was a culture of fear and intimidation. I will have to say, with Admiral Neffenger's approach, it was a breath of fresh air that he came in with a different kind of an attitude, not only towards oversight, but how it is that he treated his rank and file. The question I have, of course, is how far down that goes into what is an immense organization, and whether that will continue with new leadership.
This assignment, what do you call it, the way they assign people to different places?
It's directed reassignment, I believe.
Where is that now? I mean, what's happening with that? I think he suspended it, right? Is that right?
So the practice has been discontinued. The only time we ask for reassignments is if it is in the interest of security, and we certainly only go to it at the very, very last opportune moment to move people across the country that way. We have put in controls so that these decisions cannot be made unilaterally. Our Office of Human Capital must get in
March along, sing a song with the army of the free. Count the brave, count the true, who have fought to victory. We're the army and proud of our name. We're the army and proudly proclaim. First to fight for the right and to build the nation's might, and the army goes rolling along. Proud of all we have done, fighting till the battle's won, and the army goes rolling along. And it's high, high, hey, the army's on its way. Count off, but Kate is loud and strong.